Frumess talks about Halloween, Halloween, Halloween. Let's all talk about Halloween, Silver Shamrock. This movie is called Phantom of the Mall, Eric's Revenge. And a quick shout out to friend of the channel and friend of Frumess, Kevin45, aka Kevin Von Spear, who loves Phantom things. I'm sure he's seen this movie before. I'll have to ask him the next time I speak to him. This is from 1989, and this is, much like Evil Speak, this is another watch that has languished in my queue for far too long. I almost purchased it. It was this poster art that you see over here. This was redone. This was beautiful poster art. Really made me want to watch the movie on a whole other level when Arrow did their re-release of Phantom of the Mall. And it just, man, that Arrow video art looked too damn good to keep passing this up. And, I was glad to finally give it a chance. Watching this, I was reminded of how integral mall culture used to be at its height in the late 80s and through the mid 90s. It was like the universe for all teenagerdom. You know what I mean? And if you're going to update and adapt the story of Phantom of the Opera, of course, which this is based on, it makes perfect sense for it to be in a mall type setting if you're making this film in 1989. Additionally, here's a fun fact for you. This is the same mall that is used in Shopping Mall, which we previously watched and reviewed. And you can totally tell, man. So I think it's really perfect for a double feature. Hey, Jody Ramone, how are you? Thank you for the skulls. Thank you. Much appreciated. Yeah, man, we like the mall. That was it. That was the center of everything in life. And so this movie does a great job of calling that back, like the fondness for the mall. And it's interesting how the mall is the perfect anchorage for this, in the same way that in the 70s, when Brian De Palma made one of my favorite films of all time, Phantom of the Paradise, which was a rock venue, was essentially the same as the mall. So they use the term Xanadu for Swan in Phantom of the Paradise, and that is kind of like what the mall is in this movie. It is like a Xanadu in a way, a little bit. You also have, let me read on here. Eric as the Phantom almost doubles as a superhero and kind of reminds me of Sam Raimi's Darkman. So Darkman came out like a year later, and that was like Sam Raimi's attempt to sort of make an original superhero film. Like, it had a bigger budget. It really, it was Sam Raimi taking all of his like Evil Dead aesthetic and like upping the game and trying to tell a superhero story. And of course, we know that he would get the chance to do it again almost a decade and 2 years later with Spider-Man, and blow everybody's face off when he did it. But he did it the first time he did it with Darkman, which also shares a lot of, DNA with Phantom of the Opera. Darkman himself is very much like the Phantom, and he even wears this like duster, and he has bandages instead of a mask. In this case, in this movie, and Eric is the character in the actual story, the literature and whatnot. Eric's mask is taken from a mannequin. He breaks a mannequin head and puts the broken piece over his face. So that kind of works. And then, he kind of becomes like a superhero a little bit. The reason why I bring up Darkman in the first place is because, watching Phantom of the Mall made me realize that Darkman 2 is heavily inspired by Phantom of the Opera, because I was noticing those parallels. And I just can't believe that I never noticed that before. I also noticed that Eric talks with a deep robotic voice, and it reminds me very much of Winslow Leach from Phantom of the Paradise. When he's as the Phantom Phoenix. It's just a really great addition. I really like it. Eventually, Eric does kind of take an evil turn. I mean, the Phantom is not a protagonist. He's an antagonistic character for the most part. I don't think there's really I guess maybe the female, the lady, the woman, whatever, the girl, the whoever plays the girl archetype is always like kind of probably the closest thing to the protagonist. Um, in this case, the Swan character, and mind you, this movie, Phantom of the Mall, as well as Phantom of the Paradise, all of them are sort of adaptations of an adaptation of Phantom of the Opera. So you have the 1925 Phantom of the Opera, but then in the 40s, I think it was, you had the Universal Phantom of the Opera, and that's the story that's the different story where the music is stolen from the Phantom, and he's locked up in the attic, and blah, blah, blah. All that stuff comes from the Universal version. It's not the same as the Phantom of the Opera, the silent one from 1925 that is super famous and that everybody knows. And so you get that character, that antagonistic character, the Swan-like character who steals. In this case, he steals land from Eric's parents as he commits arson, is the guy who owns the mall and his son. I forget his name. I don't even remember his name is. But in any case, there's just a lot of tie-in, and I like it. Eventually, though, yes, Eric does turn evil. We get a lot of flashback. It's funny. I forgot what we were talking about. Oh, remember we were talking about the adaptation of Frankenstein, the angry black girl and her monster. And I was talking about how Chris, who's like the Frankenstein character, he doesn't have a lot of pathos. We could have used some flashbacks with him to really get to know him a little bit better. And in this movie, we do get that. We get that very thing that I was sort of craving. And we get it in the form of Eric having flashbacks with his girlfriend when he was still alive, before he was scarred, hideously scarred and whatnot. So Eric takes a turn. He eventually, he gets catches fire. He jumps off a whole thing, and I don't know. There's this whole conspiracy about taking over Eric's family's house so they can build the mall. And what's funny is working in the mall is a super youthful pre-Weasel Pauly Shore. It's right before Encino Man, and Pauly Shore, he works at a yogurt stand, and he's kind of like the comic relief, but he also plays a straight sidekick in the last third of the movie, as he abandons his habit of leaving gummy body parts in the frozen yogurt. And also, additionally, the guy who burns down Eric's house turns out to be Mac's dad from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. And if he didn't get humorously crushed in the story, like dies, you could totally link the two in continuity with this film being the reason why Mac's dad is in jail. It would totally friggin' work, man. That like, oh, he went to jail because he committed arson, used to be the small security guard. I would have loved that. That would have been great. That would have totally worked. We get some real, as I mentioned before, there's some great kung fu that just comes out of nowhere. Like the Phantom character, Eric, he is really good at kung fu inexplicably. He is great at kicking ass kung fu style. And yeah, so that's streaming right now on Shudder. Check it out if you are interested. I gave it 3 stars.